Hello everyone, Professor D here, and this week we're going to talk about immunity and environmental health. Immunity is the body's ability to fight off infections, and also if we are injured, it's the ability to repair and regrow any damaged tissue and move forward as a being. Oftentimes, we hear discussion in our society about the immune system when someone is sick, if they have the cold, for example, a common cold, a virus. And we might notice that some people tend to be sick or have the cold or some sort of virus more often than others. So I want to spend a few moments talking about the physiology behind the immune system. Every human being, well, typically every human being, is born with an immune system. Oftentimes when we're first born, as infants, it's very premature and immature. It doesn't have the capabilities that an adult immune system has, which is one of the benefits for those that are able to breastfeed their infants. They are able to moms are able to pass the antibodies that their bodies have created onto the infants for especially about the first 6 months of life until the infant's body is more apt and able to create those antibodies. The immune system is very closely associated with the anatomical system that is the lymphatic system. We may have heard this term when we go to the doctors and we're not feeling well and they palpate to check if we have swollen lymph nodes. That's part of the lymphatic system. So what happens is there are organs throughout the body that work to take fluid, especially from damaged tissue, or if there was a bacteria or a virus that had to be damaged and now there's a lot of broken body parts from those organisms, they need to be removed from our body. Just like we talked about previously, the importance of being able to remove waste from our gastrointestinal tract and urinary tracts, we also need to be able to remove the waste from our immune system killing organisms. And that goes through the lymph system. And it passes through several lymph nodes. And if there was a significant infection, more and more lymph nodes are going to hold on to the fluid and keep cleaning it, if you will, and killing any of the organisms and breaking down the remaining cell parts. And that's when they will sort of back up in a lymph node, and that's when a lymph node can get swollen. And when they get swollen, sometimes they're a little tender and warm and painful. But that should subside once the individual has healed from that infection. There are other organs that you'll read about, the spleen, the thymus, that are part of the lymphatic system as well. And ultimately, what they're doing is making sure that the white blood cells are present. And the white blood cells are very important because there's several different types, and they all have a specific job. Some of them really look for bacteria, and then they go and they take care of bacteria. Others look for viruses or cancer cells. Some of them will look for parasitic worms and parasitic amoeba and things like that. So there's different types that we have that are always circulating at a low level in our body. That way, when needed, there's some, and then the immune system is stimulated to increase production of that particular type of white blood cell. This is why your provider might run a blood panel to see if there's a particular type of white blood cell that's elevated from the average, and then that will sort of alert them as to what type of infection might be going on in your body. Because certainly bacteria would be treated differently than a viral infection. So it's helpful for your body to note the difference, and then if a provider is going to prescribe something, they need to know what type of infection it is as well, because many of them will result in fever, chills, sweats, feeling cold even though you're sweating, being very fatigued, because certainly getting lots of sleep, as we've talked previously, really helps your body's immune system to do what it needs to do. Another thing of note that you saw in your reading is that the skeletal muscles help bring the lymph fluid, especially from the lower extremities, etc., up toward the heart. And then also the diaphragm, as we're breathing, that helps pump a major component of the lymph back toward the heart. So once it's been cleansed, the fluid's been cleansed by all of the lymph nodes, then it returns to the heart to stay in circulation, because certainly there's still fluid there as well, and we just want to clean the fluid and then return that to the heart so that it can continue to circulate through body. So it's important to understand that if you're not feeling well, you still want to get up. Yes, you need your rest, but you want to get up in between resting and move around the house a little bit. Get some movement in your lower extremities so that it can pump that lymph back up to the heart and back through the lymph nodes so that your body can do its job and really cleanse the material and essentially get rid of all the waste that is occurring as your immune system and those cells are breaking down the areas of the body of the infection. So what are some things to look for? I think we all sort of have a basic understanding of what it means to have an infection and have a viral or bacterial infection. And a lot of it is fatigue, as I said before, fever. You could sweat but still feel really cold, might be a little foggy-minded, so on and so forth. Might just feel you need more sleep than you can possibly get. Signs of an imbalanced immune system. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, some people tend to get ill more quickly than others. Now, why is that? Since essentially everyone has an immune system unless they have some of those compromising disorders of the immune system that you read about in your text. The rest of us have an immune system. So how come some work better than others? Well, it's just like any other organ. Some of them work better than others. Sometimes there's certainly a genetic factor. Others, it's age. As we get older, our immune system does not work as well as it did when we were teens and in our 20s. But there's also some things that we can do, certainly being physically active. We talked about how important that was in regards to Wolff's Law. Well, that's also important with making sure that our lymph is constantly flowing by getting that physical exercise, like we just mentioned, and using those lower extremities. If we sit sedentary too long, that can have an impact on our body's ability to fight off an infection. Certainly what we eat really matters. It's important to have all of the nutrients that our body needs, especially those vitamins and minerals, so we might need to supplement if necessary, if we're not getting them in a varied rainbow diet, so to speak, with all the colors of the rainbow included in the vegetables and fruits that we eat. Then we might be limited on some of the nutrients that we need and the phytochemicals that we need to help our body better fight off an infection. So certainly diet's really important, as is water consumption. And here, especially when you're not feeling well, you often hear people say, make sure you push the fluids. You want lots of fluids. You want to have a lot of water, but you also want to make sure you have a little bit of those minerals and sort of salts in there as well too. That's important because you don't want to just be drinking water. Sometimes you might notice if you have an upset stomach and if you have a stomach virus, you drink too much water, that increases the vomiting. So you do want to make sure that you're getting some of those electrolytes in there as well, in the salts that are important for balancing the immune system. Again, everything goes back to homeostasis. When we are sick with an infection, our body's immune system wants to kill the infection, prevent it from spreading, and then get us back to homeostasis as quickly as possible. Now, depending on what type of infection it is, bacterial infections typically don't last as long as viral, and that is because bacterial cells live outside of our cells almost all the time. There's a few exceptions, but we don't need to get into that. So we are able to have medications, and our immune cells are able to notice, hey, that cell should not be in this body, let's destroy it. Viral cells are different. Viruses, what they do is they can't grow and replicate on their own. They have to go into our cells and steal the machinery of our cells to replicate. So what happens is the immune system, as well as any medication that we might have, it has to determine, is this a normal healthy cell in this host, in this individual, or does this one have a virus in it? And that's a little more complicated to figure out than bacteria versus human cell. So that's one thing to know. You may have wondered, why does a viral infection take longer for me to get over? Or why aren't they prescribing antibiotics? Well, that's because antibiotics are targeting bacterial cells. If it's a virus, it's useless to prescribe antibiotics because it doesn't have those bacterial cell walls to target, because the virus is inside of your cells. So oftentimes you have to let the body do its thing and work its way out, because there aren't a lot of medications, unless it's a very extreme virus, there aren't a lot of medications that will be prescribed for a viral infection. I want to switch topics just a little bit and talk about Stress and attitude. Now, we've talked about perception and attitude a little bit before, but stress can, and studies do show that stress has an effect on our immune system. So this is another thing. We mentioned that some people seem to be ill more than others. Sometimes they might be stressed. So maybe it's psychologically that they're so stressed that their body is focused on things that are emotionally stressing them out, that it can't focus on a bacteria or virus that's physically stressing out the body. So that's definitely something that could be part of it too. Not always, but oftentimes those people that seem to be better at coping with stress sometimes don't get sick as often. So that's a thing to notice definitely as well. And as we talked about before, attitude can certainly affect your outcome. And the studies are still coming in on that. But having the focus that, oh, I can beat this, my body's strong, and still working through it, as opposed to the woe is me attitude, oh, I'm always sick, that eventually can start to increase the amount of time that you're going to be ill. So certainly the studies are starting to show that there's a psychoneuroimmunological component, whereas your thoughts can have an effect on your immune system. And for many years, medicine was saying, no, that's not the case. Well, now it is starting to show that your stress levels and your balance psychologically can definitely affect your immune system's ability to properly keep your body healed and fight off infections. Another topic that we want to talk about this week, and I will just leave you with a few notes here, is the environment and its effect on our wellness. When I say the environment, I don't just mean the woods and green spaces and things like that. That's definitely part of it. But I'm talking about the environment inside your home. Is it cluttered space? Is it an unfinished project that's been there for many years? Do you have safe exit points? Is the water working? Do you have proper heat in the wintertime, air conditioning in the summer, those types of things, internal environment. And there's an environment at work too. Ergonomically, is your desk and chair in the right space? What's the lighting like? I had someone today just mention how their migraine today was so exacerbated by the lighting in their office space because it wasn't the best choice of lighting. So they wanted to turn their lights off in their office and just be in the dark. So there's that. There's sort of an inside environment of being in buildings, because typically humans are in buildings the majority of their day. And then there's also, do you live in more of an urban or rural environment? Do you have a lot of green space? Are there parks to go to? Do you have a lot of acreage? Do you live more in a high-rise apartment complex without a lot of greenery? Is there a lot of smog in your area? There are places maybe in New Hampshire, Vermont, we don't think of this, in northern New England, but there are cities where they will have air quality and smog alerts, especially in the summer, because the air is so bad you really shouldn't be going outside and breathing it, and you should stay indoors. So that might not be something that those of us in northern New England think of, but in other areas they have to be concerned about the air quality. Certainly there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of air pollution as well. So these are the things that can definitely affect us over time. There's also some environmental mishaps that have occurred, and you'll talk about that in your discussion forum this week, where companies have had accidents, or they've purposely, illegally and improperly disposed of bad chemicals, which eventually led to health concerns in individuals. And sometimes there's natural disasters that can change our environment as well, and terrorist attacks, unfortunately, such as in 9/11, that really has still left a lot of people recovering from respiratory illnesses, etc., due to the buildings coming down that day. So these are some things to think of, that we may be used to our own environment, but there are people that live in different environments, and are there effects to that? There are also studies that show living closer to the ocean, where there's more negative ions, that can really benefit their health as well, whereas being more in a landlocked state, they might not have that benefit. So throughout the reading and the lectures and the discussion forums this week, really think about, how does the environment affect where we live? And also, environment is related to, if we're in a more rural area, do we have access to the health care that we need? Is it 35 miles to an emergency department if something goes wrong? Is it a full-time ambulance in the area, or is it volunteer? So these individuals have to get out of work or get out of bed if it's late at night, go to the emergency station, get the ambulance, drive it to your place. What's the response time? Especially as we get older, it's important to think about these things. So please reflect this week on the environment in your home, in your workspace, at school, or where you're working on your schoolwork, how it is ergonomically, as well as your community. And just think about how that influences your health. And for those that are in an area where it isn't as healthy as it might be here in northern New England, what are their options to move? How realistic would it be for you if you decided, oh, I really should move in the next 6 months? What are those challenges? So let's think about people that are born in more of a urban area, that they might have limitations to be able to get to a rural area like this. Well, I hope you enjoyed that information and have a great week.